Welcome to the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast, a show dedicated to helping you level up your instruction in order to craft authentic learning experiences for both you and your students. I'm your host, Lee Tucker, a high school English teacher and ed tech enthusiast, and I want to join you on your journey to becoming the best instructor that you possibly can. So if you're ready, grab your adventuring gear and let's get going. Hey, what's up, 8-Bit crew? Today is Thursday, May 6th, 2021, and this is episode 39 of the 8-Bit Instructor Podcast. It is quite the stormy day as I am recording this. Got thunderstorms coming through our area this week, but hopefully you are doing well. It is Teacher Appreciation Week, so all you teachers out there, thank you so much for what you are doing. I know especially this year, I am thankful for all of the hard work that you have put into making this year as good as you can make it. So hopefully this week will be an encouraging one for you, and thank you again. I can't express my thanks enough for what all teachers are doing in their classrooms this year. I got some great content for you today later on in the boss battle. We're going to talk a little bit about some video game stuff. We're talking about some mobile games today, the Marvel Strike Force game, but talking about what it has taught me about the ideas of collaboration and how I can use that in class. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But first, we're going to get into some news and updates around the education world and take a look into the treasure chest. A few things came out from the Department of Education this week and last week. So first of all, the Department of Education released a state plan template for the American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And essentially, it's a fund to help schools kind of recover after all of the COVID stuff. So 2/3 of those funds have already gone out to states, and then the final third will be released when state plans are approved by the Department of Education. And with this, nearly $122 billion will be going towards safely reopening and sustaining safe school operations, as well as working to address the impact of COVID on students. So a lot of that stuff, the learning loss that they're anticipating, and things like social emotional wellness and student health and all that kind of stuff. All of this is kind of going toward that. So it's good to see that schools are getting help, especially a lot of schools who were already maybe struggling and underfunded to begin with. Hopefully that will be a step in the right direction for them to be able to do better things for their students. The other news from the Education Department, the Ed Department announced state allocations of $800 million in the American Rescue Plan funds to support students experiencing homelessness. So this is another fund and another relief effort that the Education Department is sending out. And they sent a letter out to states kind of urging them to focus the funds on identifying homeless youth, providing services for them in light of the COVID impact, and providing assistance to enable homeless students to attend and participate fully in school activities this spring and this summer. And, students who experience homelessness are already at a huge disadvantage and often struggle a lot in schools. And so being, virtual or, shut down and all that is definitely going to make things tough for them. We don't often think about students experiencing homelessness and that being an issue in school. I think a lot of us don't have that at the forefront of our minds, but, it does happen, and it impacts them a lot. I've had a few students throughout the years who I know for sure were homeless, at least at the time that I had them. And I know the struggle that they have to make things happen, and even something as simple as getting to school and that kind of stuff can be very difficult. So again, it's good to see that schools are getting more funding to be able to help students out through all of this mess that we've been experiencing. On the Google side of things, there's a few things that came out last week or two concerning Google Apps. One is just a reminder that Google Sites Classic is going away. So if you have any websites that you use in the old classic Google Sites, that is going to need to be transferred over to the new sites by the end of the year. And starting on May 15th, you're not going to be able to create a classic site. So if Google Sites is something that you dabble into, then you definitely want to make sure, if you have not already, that you kind of work over to the new sites, because that old one is going away soon. Another small update coming in, like the Gmail sidebar, Gmail, Google Drive, Google Docs, and that concerns the Google Tasks option on the web. So Google Tasks will now have the ability to edit details in line in that sidebar. So if you need to put any additional information, you don't have to click on the details to go to that next screen. It will just be available right there. This started rolling out on April 26th, so you should already see this. If you haven't, it will probably be there in the next day or two. And finally, in an effort to make email, safe and make sure that users are cautious, email threads that are from recipients outside of your organization are going to be labeled as external. And some of you may have already seen some of this. If you get an email from an outside, something outside of your domain, when you respond, there's like a yellow bar that says, this comes from an external source. Do you trust this person? And all that kind of stuff. But now you're also going to see a little yellow tag in the subject line that says external. So it's just a reminder from Google to treat external emails with caution and utilize, care with the kind of information you send to external emails. And that will start, or it already started rolling out on April 29th, but it may take up to 15 days to see that. So you may not see that yet, but you will very soon. I really feel like I need to cue up a little AC/DC Thunderstruck with all of this thunder going on around me, but I'm probably not going to do that because of potential copyright issues. So instead, we're just going to go ahead and head on over and take a look at what's in the treasure chest today. So today's tip is not a brand new one. It's something that you may already be familiar with, but it is a super helpful little trick. And that is some little tricks that you can do with different Google files and the URLs. So if you didn't know, there are some special tags you can put into the very end of a URL in different Google documents to make certain things happen. So what you're going to do in order to do this, you'll open up whatever document you need, whether it's a Google Doc, slide, sheets, drawings, and you're going to go up to the address bar and into the document's URL. Now, when you click on the URL, kind of originally, you're just going to see docs.google.com / a bunch of letters and numbers and symbols and all that. But what you want to look for is the very last backslash toward the end of the URL. So an easy way to find that, if you click on the URL and it, highlights everything, but you don't see the end of it, just hit the down arrow key and it will take you to the very end of the URL. And then you want to go and find the very last backslash, and then you'll see edit and then probably a bunch of stuff behind that. So just say backslash, edit, letters and numbers, blah, 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 blah. So what you're going to do is you're going to erase everything after that final backslash, and then you're going to put in one of the following words in order to do some of these tricks. And I will tell you what it is and then explain what it does. And then they will be there in the show notes as well if you forget. So the first thing is, if you do a backslash preview, you're going to be able to see a document without all of the editing stuff around it. So let's say you have a Google Doc and you want people to just be able to look at it and read it. You can copy that URL and then put the backslash preview at the very end. And when they click on the link, they're just going to see the document with kind of a black background around it. So it's really good for students for distraction-free reading. So they're not seeing all the toolbars and all that kind of stuff in there that you would get with a view-only mode. So backslash preview is a really good one. The other one is super helpful. Backslash copy is going to force the person to make a copy. So if you share stuff out, if you've ever experienced this, sometimes when you send stuff to other people, they end up editing your stuff and then you have to go back and fix it and all that. To prevent this, you can use this backslash copy trick, and they're just going to see a page that has the blue make a copy button. And then when they click that button, they will have their own copy of that document, and then they can edit it to their heart's delight without messing yours up. So definitely something, if you are going to have a lot of people potentially using that document and making copies of it, then you definitely want to do that. It's a super helpful one. The next trick that I like even more is backslash template backslash preview. And what that will do is it's kind of like preview mode, but it also gives the option of making a copy. So if you want somebody to be able to look at what's in the document before they commit to making a copy, then you can use this /template /preview mode, and then they'll be able to see all of that. And then they can make a copy, and that's all they can do. So they won't be able to edit or anything like that. So definitely that's one that I use a lot, and I love that. And then the last one I want to talk about, there's more out there, but these are the ones that I have found like the most useful. The last one is backslash present. And what that does is you can use this. This one's just for Google Slides. And what you can do there is when you send that link with /present, then it's going to open that Google slide deck in presentation mode. So rather than having view only where they see the toolbars, they see the sidebar with all the thumbnails and all this kind of stuff, it's going to project it in presentation mode so that they can click through the slides. And I really like to use that, especially if it's something like an activity that I want them to do where they're kind of clicking through slides, or I've talked about doing choose your own adventure stuff in Google Slides, and that's a really good way to have them be able to work through a choose your own adventure. Is you can send it to them in present mode, and then they actually click on the options, and it will take them, rather than being able to see all of the slides at once and then just kind of picking their way through. So definitely helpful. And one of the things, if you do any of this, you just kind of want to check and make sure you've got share settings on. If you just have it private to you, then other people aren't going to be able to access that document. So if you are using these little URL tricks, then make sure you've got the right share settings available. Well, all right, that will take care of news and updates and this week's treasure chest. So up next, we're going to get into a little bit of mobile gaming with Marvel Strike Force, but I'm looking at some things that I learned about collaboration through playing this game, and that's coming up in this week's boss battle. this week I'm going back a little bit nerdy and talking some more about games. And today I'm looking at a mobile game, actually, and that is Marvel Strike Force. So Marvel Strike Force is a mobile game on iOS and Android. So obviously I'm playing it because it's a Marvel game, and so I, am hooked. But as I've been playing it recently, I really got to thinking about the whole idea of collaboration that's involved in there, because there are a couple of different ways that collaboration is utilized in this game. And so I pulled out just some lessons that I've learned in the last month or so playing this game, and how collaboration really works in kind of like the let's call it the real world, even though we're in a Marvel universe. So just a quick overview of the game. Marvel Strike Force, it's a mobile game where basically you unlock all the different Marvel characters and you fight with them in teams of 5 to complete different missions, different quests, and all that kind of stuff. So in the game, you can also join alliances and work together with other alliance members to complete bigger objectives. And what it does is it essentially unlocks bigger rewards for you. So if you're just playing the game by yourself, you can play it well, but you're not going to get as much stuff as you would if you join an alliance. And so once you do that, there are 2 main modes that work really well that are connected to collaboration, and that's the raid mode and then the war mode. And what I'm really going to do is just look at kind of what these 2 modes are, but then I'm pulling out lessons that we can take and utilize in the classroom to help our students learn collaboration a little bit better. So first of all, I want to talk about the raid mode. So basically the way this works is the goal of a raid is to complete a series of battles and try to complete all of them as a team. So you can join as a group, and different difficulties determine how many group members can join. So you can have 4 to 8 alliance members in a group, and then sometimes there are 1 to 3 different groups. So you can have anywhere from 4 to 24 of your members working on this at the same time. And so once you do that, once the raid started, you battle through a series of your own individual team fights that are all roughly the same difficulty. So you get to kind of choose as you work through it. You get to choose what you want to fight and what path you want to go down, but they are all on a roughly same difficulty level, and they get progressively more difficult as you move forward. Throughout this, you can use the same team, same characters multiple times. So if you're doing an easier one, you can take your strongest team and kind of breeze through everything pretty quickly. But they only last for 24 hours. So timing is really key in there. But it's not just that you can go through all of it all at once. You have like an energy cap, and each fight uses up a certain amount of energy. And so you can't just go from beginning to end in 20 minutes. You can fight a few times, and then when you run out of energy, you either have to wait for it to recharge, or you have to buy more energy through the game's monetary system and all that. And so it requires you kind of coming back regularly to fight maybe a few more times throughout the day. So you can kind of see the draw in constantly playing it. And if you ever wonder why your students are constantly playing games on their phones, this is why, because they've been set up to draw you back in an hour or 2. But the real kind of key thing in these raids is that there are different paths to go down. So when you first start, you'll have maybe, 4 or 5 different options of which path you want to go down, but you can't go backwards. So once you pick a certain path to go down, you can't go down, any of the other ones. So if two people go down the same path, the team can't get 100% on that raid because they've left one path kind of uncompleted. And so there's some coordination that's necessary for it. You got to be able to know, okay, like this team member went down this way, but nobody's gone down this path, so I should go down this one. And then there's rewards. And everyone gets kind of the same reward based on the percentage of the raid that's completed. So if your team completes 30% of it, you get this certain reward. If they complete 60%, they get a better one. If they complete all 100%, then they get the best reward possible. And so there's an incentive for all of the members to be active. So if you've started it within that 24-hour period, if everybody has kind of gotten to the end of their pathway, but then there's somebody else that hasn't. They might, throw a chat message out there that's saying, hey, make sure you kind of complete it. So like I said, there's some of that accountability and some of that incentive for all of them to be active, because by completing more of it, you're getting, a better reward. So lessons that I kind of pulled out of this. So one, it kind of showed me that there are possible ways for us to find to take some of those things that are maybe routine or mundane, something like a quiz or a homework or assignment or something that they do maybe weekly, and then kind of up the ante by making it a team challenge instead of just an individual challenge, where students can complete that same type of task, but you can maybe total it up, and if the whole team gets 100% completion, or let's say it's a quiz, if you can look at how many questions they get right or the percentage that they get right, and if they get this certain percentage, have some kind of reward available for them. And it doesn't have to be, a reward kind of outside of it. It might just be you get an extra, 5 bonus points, or you get some kind of incentive that works in your classroom. Because one of the things that's a part of this is that it's an in-game incentive. So think about what works well, like inside your class, that students would be incentivized to work for it. And again, if it's something where the team is working together, then it's a good way to help encourage them to keep each other accountable. So if you're doing it for, let's say, a homework assignment, and maybe you're looking at making sure that each student finishes it and does all of the problems or whatever. And then you can make that maybe like a team challenge, a team raid, where they get a point for each one that they've completed or whatnot. So that's kind of the first lesson that I drew out of that. The other thing that I kind of looked at is the idea of timing, and how placing the right kind of time crunch can really enhance focus. So in these raids, and also in the other one that I'll talk about a little bit, the war, it's all within 24 hours. So there is this kind of time crunch aspect of it where you have to work through it, and kind of like I mentioned, you can't just go right through it. So it's not like I could wait until the last minute and go all the way down a path. I would have to give my profile some time to recharge. So there's an incentive to jump into one of these right away when it's first started, to give yourself time to recharge energy so that you can complete the rest of them. And so learning that balance of giving students time, but also not giving them too much time. And that's something that you would have to kind of gauge out. And again, if it's for something like a homework assignment, then that time restraint might be pretty easy to do. It's, by the time you walk into class the next day. But if it's a quiz, it might be something like, in the next, 15 minutes or whatever. But again, you have to know your classes. You have to kind of gauge that and use it well, in the sense of putting just the right amount of stress so that they have time to get it done and do it well to the best of their abilities, but you're not giving them too much time where they're procrastinating on it. The next lesson that I came up with is the idea that students can hold each other accountable to make sure that they're getting everything done. So, it's one thing if a student does an assignment and it only affects them. It's a completely different thing if the student not completing something affects other people. Now, with that being said, and depending on what grade level you're teaching, sometimes you have to really work to teach them how to hold each other accountable. Because, a lot of times students, especially up in the high school level, they don't know how to hold each other accountable the right way. They get really angry and get very negative. And so it's a good teaching moment to help them see what are good ways to help motivate somebody without just blasting them out of anger. But it is a good kind of social connection of utilizing some of that social atmosphere to help students be accountable, where some students who may not normally do a homework assignment or may not try on a quiz, maybe just kind of filling it out, might actually start trying a little bit more if they realize that it is affecting their overall group. And again, what you might look at to put this in the right perspective is in these little missions, these raids, it's not a negative thing that's being taken away if you don't get 100%. It's adding additional stuff. So, you might frame it in the sense of it's not like everybody fails if this one person doesn't do their part. It's maybe in order to get the A, everybody has to do their part because they're going above and beyond and putting their best forward. But, again, a lot of this is something that is going to be very individual to your own classroom, the way that you've set things up and what's going to work really well for you. And then the last thing that I got from this is this idea of paths and throwing optional pathways that might get students to communicate and to strategize better with each other. And so this could be something outside of one single assignment. It could be a series of things that you set up and say, all right, you have to complete all of these different tasks, but you can only complete a certain number of these tasks. And if you have, if you've read John Meehan's book, Adrenaline Rush, there's a thing that he does in there. It's called a QR break-in. It's a big kind of group thing where each student might complete the same type of activity, but for them to get credit for doing it, maybe all 4 of the team members have to complete it and submit it to get that credit. So you could do something like that, or you could set up these little pathways where pathway 1 involves doing these 3 activities, pathway 2 involves doing these 3 other activities, but activities that are similar. So maybe the same difficulty level or the same content or whatever, but it might be different products that they create or different ways that they do that. But you can limit them and say, all right, if you do pathway 1, you can't do 2, 3, or 4. And then having them look as a team what they can do and kind of divide that up so that they're all contributing to that kind of overall end goal. All right, so that's the raid in Marvel Strike Force. But this next one is one that I think is even more collaborative than the raids, and that is the war. So how wars work in this game is the goal is to outscore another alliance. It's a one-on-one alliance versus alliance kind of thing, and your goal is to outscore the other alliance by defeating different teams and destroying different rooms on the opponent's helicarrier. And I'm not going to get in deep with the Marvel stuff, but if you don't know what the helicarrier is, don't worry about it. It's just know that you've got different teams that set stuff up and you have to destroy each team. And so you set up a defense by selecting a room on this helicarrier, and then there are 2 slots in each room. And then in that slot, you can add up to 8 teams for defense. And the way it works is if you defeat a team, you earn a certain number of points. If you defeat all 16 teams in a room, then you destroy that room and you earn even more points. So let's just say, for the sake of example, if I get, let's just say 1 point per team. So I defeat a team, I get a point. This goes on and on and on. If I defeat all 16 of them in that same room, I got 16 points, but then I might get an additional 10 points for destroying that room. So you work on strategizing through that. Now, one of the catches with this is that each character that you have can only be used once. So you can't use characters that you've put in your defense. You have to look at strategizing how you use your characters on offense and on defense. You have to plan out which ones you're going to use. And so, for example, I'm not going to throw my strongest team at a really weak group, because if I use them, they're done. If I come across a stronger team, I'm not going to be able to fight them. So alliance leaders can strategize by coordinating attacks, by marking rooms to focus on. And sometimes you have to use like multiple attacks to take down some of these really rough teams. And so it might be where the people in the alliance, they're chatting and saying, "Hey, we got to take this last team out, but they're really strong." So you might throw an attack on there with the sole purpose of trying to defeat one particular opponent, leaving the other four to for somebody else to kind of clean up. But again, it's some of those bonuses that help out. So with this, there really is a lot of strategy involved, because these are not all the same difficulty. You might have some really weak teams to go up against, and then you might have some really tough teams to go against. So your stronger players in the game, your players that have, these really high level teams, they're the ones that are going to go after these really strong teams. And then your newer players, your weaker players are going to go for those weaker teams. So what does all that mean? I know for some of you that might have just been a bunch of gibberish, but hear me out and listen to some of these lessons that I got from this. So one idea that I came up with is we can set up groups or even classes for these kind of friendly competitions against each other. And you can set it up where students create the questions to pose to other classes. And so this could be good for something like a unit review. And you can even differentiate by difficulty to make sure you're challenging all students. So the idea here is that collaboration doesn't always have to be, quote, equal. In other words, it doesn't have to be everybody doing the same kind of thing or the same amount of stuff. Think of it this way. If you take it and set limits to how much each student can answer, that creates an opportunity for collaboration and strategizing, because now all of a sudden, let's just say each student can only answer 5 questions, say. And if you get maybe 3 different levels of difficulty. So maybe there's a 1 star that's easy, 2 stars is medium difficulty, 3 stars is very difficult. So let's just say students are able to see on some kind of chart or something the different stars. So here in this particular room or whatever, there's 5 easy level questions, but down here this other place has maybe 3 3-star questions and 2 2-star questions. Well, if I know I can only answer a certain number of questions, if I'm in a strong subject area that I feel very comfortable with, I'm not going to say, "Oh, let me take the 1-star easy questions," because somebody else might need the easier questions. I can go for the more difficult questions and do something like that. So I think it's a really good way of differentiating difficulties because you can set it up to where like I said, if students can only answer a certain number of questions, and then you're still doing a team score to see, which team or which class scores more points than the other classes, then that gives you a little bit more, buy-in to get students to work together, to communicate, to talk to each other and say, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What can I do well? You can even go so far as to maybe categorize the different questions, again, depending on your content area, and say, all right, well, this particular section has some really difficult questions, but I feel very confident with this category of questions, so I think I could probably take a more difficult question than I might just randomly take with the content. So I think that would be a great idea for some review stuff. It could be a good idea, maybe even on the other side of it, for getting into a new unit where you give students and give groups some different categories, some different topics, and have them come up with a handful of questions, label the difficulty and all that, to get them to look into some of the content before you get in and go over all of that kind of stuff. So those are just some ideas. This idea of collaboration, I know that has always been a tough thing for me to really work with in my class, because I think a lot of students, a lot of people in general, don't necessarily understand the idea of collaboration versus what we might call group work. And so just some of those key ideas that I came out with. One is this idea that collaboration does not necessarily have to be equal. In other words, if there are 4 people in my group, it does not have to equally be each person doing a quarter of the work. It's more about finding the strengths and weaknesses that each person can use to contribute to the overall group product in the end. Another really key idea is this idea of a time crunch, and using a time limit can take some kind of project or some kind of assignment that normally one single person might be able to do all on their own. But if there's a time crunch involved, then it might force them to divide that work up a little bit more. And I actually kind of witnessed this last week. I did a short research project with one of my classes, and it was definitely something that each student could have done individually on their own, but I put a time crunch on it. They only had last week to do it, and it seemed overwhelming to them until they realized that by dividing it out and figuring out who could do what, and they're working on different things at the same time, and then putting it all together and all that, it really helped the collaboration aspect of it. So hopefully that gives you some ideas of things that you can do to get students collaborating, to get them working together. Communication is obviously a big part of that as well, but taking some of those kind of ordinary things that might not seem collaborative, but finding ways to make them collaborative so that students are working together and doing some of that more difficult, more challenging stuff by utilizing their own kind of strengths and minimizing their weaknesses. So that will take care of this week's boss battle. Up next, question of the week. So for this week's question of the week, we're talking about collaboration. So what I would like to know is, what are some of your ideas for getting students to improve their ability to collaborate together? So, I talked about some things like, adding that kind of time crunch aspect of it can really improve the collaboration. Limiting what students can do might be an idea. What are some things that you have done that have kind of helped students collaborating together so that it does not become one single student kind of doing all of the work? So Give me your responses. You can leave a comment on the episode page at 8bitinstructor.com, or you can tweet your responses to me and tag me at Comic Socks, or use the hashtag 8bitcrew. Well, that will just about do it for this week's episode. I hope you've had a great week. I hope that this Teacher Appreciation Week has in some way kind of renewed and restored your, faith in your job. It's easy at this time of year for us to get kind of bogged down and worn down. So hopefully something happened this week to help you remember why you do what you do. And if not, just know that I really appreciate everything that you are doing out there, because we are giving it our best and doing the best that we can, and that's what we can do. That's all we can do, and I really appreciate all of the effort that you put out there. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts: Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever. And make sure to share this podcast with someone else who could benefit from it. And as we're going into the summer, I'm definitely looking for more opportunities to talk to folks for the fall sessions. So if you've got something that you are passionate about, something that you have really enjoyed doing in your class, reach out to me, let me know. I'd love to have you on. So stay safe out there. I'm proud of you and proud of the work that you are doing. Keep getting out there and keep giving it your best. Keep leveling up that teaching craft. And until next week, may your swords stay sharp and your shields hold strong. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the 8-Bit Instructor YouTube channel for EdTech tips and tutorials, as well as other content on my website, 8bitinstructor.com. And of course, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Comic Socks and use the hashtag 8bitcrew. See you next week.